everyone, I'm here with a bit of a rambly video. I've been trying to make this video for the past few days and then I film it and then I delete it and I think that's not what I want to say perfectly. So I realized that imperfectly saying something is better than not saying anything. As they say, silence never helps the oppressed, only the oppressors. So in case you don't know where I stand, Black Lives Matter. I am against racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia. Basically, I believe we should all be treated with dignity and respect, and we should treat people the way we want to be treated. And, you know, maybe some people will say, well, that's a pie in the sky sort of ideal world to believe that everyone should be treated equally with dignity and respect, but that is what I believe. So, obviously, what's been going on in the world, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that there have been massive protests all over the world in support of Black Lives Matter. You know, at the end of May, there was the terrible, horrible murder of George Floyd. And, you know, I always think about that was caught on camera. How many other things aren't being caught on camera? How many other people have stories that we don't know about? And we know that that is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much going on when it comes to Black Americans in the United States, so much injustice throughout the whole criminal system, from the police targeting people to them being more likely to be convicted and to go to jail, to, you know, sitting in jail without bail. Like the whole thing is just, you know, the whole prison industrial complex is just it's crazy, and it's very, very sad. And so, you know, I know that this issue is in the spotlight right now, but it's not a new issue. This has been going on like really since the beginning of America. You know, Black people being treated so, you know, just horribly, and it needs to stop. It's, you know, it should have never happened. You know, I hear people say this is, you know, it should have been stopped a long time ago. It should have never happened in the first place, but here we are. So I'm really hoping that this is a watershed moment and that there will be change in the world. It's easy for me to sit here in Canada as a white person and say, oh, that's so terrible in the United States. But we have our own issues here too. We're not perfect, and our history is different than the United States for sure. But here, racism is directed towards Indigenous people for the most part. I'm not saying there isn't issues with Black people being treated poorly here in Canada and racism towards them in Canada either, because that certainly is an issue as well. But I think that you know, it's how do I want to say this? It's, you know, there's racism exists here too. I think, you know, we see it a lot in how Indigenous people here are treated, but it also spreads over to other groups as well, including Black Canadians too, unfortunately. So we have our own stuff to work on too. So I'm not just pointing fingers at the United States. We have stuff that we need to work on as well. So I wanted to talk about kind of the response within the witchy community, and I know this is a bit rambly, but I'm just saying my thoughts about things. So I'm on Twitter, and I follow a lot of just various, you know, authors and witchy people and new age people, but also like, you know, rock stars and other artists and things. And it's been fascinating to watch who steps up to the plate and makes a stand and says, you know, Black Lives Matter and this is important and human rights matter and we need to fix things and we need to defund the police, who says nothing, and who says disappointing things. And I think that's the thing, is whenever an issue comes into the spotlight, for example, a couple of years ago with the Me Too movement, and now we have Black Lives Matter in the spotlight, you get to see where people's values are. And some people will step up to the plate and you'll be proud of, and some people will disappoint you, unfortunately. So I have seen some disappointing things. I've seen a few people, mind you, most people have been pretty good, but there's been a few people who kind of are on the more new agey side, more into the manifestation side, where I saw one person who was like, you know, don't lower your vibration and get into politics, or, you know, people saying things like, well, don't focus on the negative because you'll just attract the negative. You have to focus only on the positive. And, you know, it's sort of this idea of if you ignore it, it'll go away. And we know that doesn't happen. Like if you get sick and you ignore it, it doesn't just go away. You get sicker. If you get an infection, you ignore it, you don't treat it, you don't get antibiotics, it'll spread through your whole body and it'll infect everything. And I think that, something like this, like with Black Lives Matter, this is an issue that's been going on for decades and decades and decades and decades. It's not new. And it's something that has just permeated, our society, and it's not good. It's infected all of us, and it's something we have to work to dismantle, and it's not going to dismantle overnight, but ignoring it is I think the worst thing you can do. We need to be talking about these things, and so I think, it's important. It's important to talk about these stuff because people are dying. People are dying because of white supremacy, and that's not okay. It's totally not okay. And people are suffering, and people are being treated as second-class citizens, and that has to stop. It's not okay. The other thing that happened this week that was disappointing was J.K. Rowling, who made some more transphobic comments, and I believe there was a blog post as well that she had transphobic comments and all sorts of things in there, and that's so disappointing. I love the Harry Potter books, but I totally don't agree with what she said, and to me it seems like a weird moment. We're in Pride Month, Black Lives Matter is coming to the spotlight, and she's saying these things. It's like, what? And to me it's just like if a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man, what's the problem here? What's the difference? I don't understand. I really don't understand what the issue is. But it's disappointing, and I really feel for trans people who maybe love these books, and then they hear J.K. Rowling saying these things, and I can totally understand why for some people it's completely ruined these books for them, and I get it. And Daniel Radcliffe had a thoughtful response about it, how the books have changed his life, obviously. And he hopes that he doesn't agree with what she said, and he hopes that that what she said doesn't destroy your enjoyment of these books. But I get for some people that it has, and that's the thing when, the artists that we love, or, maybe the spiritual teachers that we follow say things that we don't agree with, or that disappoint us, or are just awful. What do we do with the work that they've done? What do we do with the art that they've done? What do we do with those things? And for some people it ruins it. And for others they say, well, the person is imperfect, but the work is still good, and I'm going to take the good out of that work. But I think that's something we have to each individually decide for ourselves. I don't think anyone gets to tell you whether or not you should or you shouldn't, for example, enjoy Harry Potter anymore. And it's a complex issue, and human beings are complex. We are not all good or all bad. Some people clearly more one way than the other, but we're complex people. And, that kind of leads me to, the statues coming down. Some I think are pretty clear cut, the Confederate statues that are coming down in the United States. There's also, correct me, is it Colson or Colton? There was the one that went down in Bristol. He was a slave trader, and people had petitioned for years to have it taken down or have it put in a museum where it could be put into context, to put a plaque on it, all these different options, and nobody did anything. So, if they tore it down and threw it in the harbor where his ships used to come in, which I think is totally justified. I'm in complete support of it. And then we have complicated ones like the Churchill statue, which was completely baffling. At the time of this recording, yesterday in London, there were, okay, let me get this right, anti-fascist protesters, so fascists, people protesting the Churchill statue, but nobody showed up to protest the Churchill statue, so it was just them. And then they were giving Nazi salutes and fighting with the police that a week ago they were telling people they shouldn't be fighting against. And they are giving Nazi salutes in front of a statue of a leader who fought fascists. So, very confusing. Anyway, these fascists don't want the Churchill statue taken down. People have pointed out that Churchill is a problematic figure. He was racist. But then he also led his country to defeat the Nazis, who were obviously awful. So what do you do with that, right? So I think, all these conversations that we're having, I think, are good because I don't have any answers. I don't have an answer for you whether the Churchill statue should come down or not, or should it be put in a museum where it's in context. Like, I don't have any answers about that, but I think it's good we're talking about that. I think it's good that we're asking these questions, because when we put up a statue in a public place, we're saying that collectively this is who we want to venerate, this is who we think is good, this is what we stand for. So we have to ask ourselves, like, what kind of statues do we want? What do we want to do with the old ones? Do we want to just tear them down? Do we want to put them in a museum? Do we want to have a statue graveyard? Like what do we want to do with these things, right? But I think they're all important conversations to have and to keep having about things. And so, it makes me think about things. It makes me question things, like, what do I value? What do I think should happen with this and that? So it's definitely good. The other thing that this whole thing's made me realize is that part of privilege is deciding whether you want to engage in something or not. So, for example, as a white person living in Canada, I get to decide, do I want to engage in talking about racism with people and having uncomfortable conversations, or do I not want to? But if you are an Indigenous person living in Canada or a Black person living in America, you don't get to have that choice because it's your life, and you don't get to step away from it. You don't get to step out of that identity in the same way that I don't get to step out of the experience of being a woman and all of that implies. Like, I don't get to have male privilege, right? Just using it as a comparison advantage. And then it also gets me thinking about things like what they call intersectionality, which is where you're more than just one identity. Like, I'm not just a woman. I'm also a white woman who's able-bodied and heterosexual, right? And so that has different privileges than somebody who is Black and trans and disabled. And those, we're not just one identity, we're a bunch. And especially if lots of those identities are marginalized or considered less than, that's going to have a big effect on the way the world treats you and how you can move in the world and what opportunities are presented to you. So, it's a lot of food for thought. And I'm still learning, I'm still thinking about things in my mind. But when it boils down to it, I just believe that, people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and we deserve to all have opportunities, and we all deserve to have equal opportunities in the world. We all deserve education and healthcare and safety, and not to be afraid to walk out on the street because somebody's going to attack us or diminish us in some way. And I just think that that's in the end what it boils down to. So I have to say that again, I'm looking at this as a white person, but I've seen a lot of people within the spiritual community respond in really thoughtful, I think, ways, and posting all sorts of links to places where you can find information and all that stuff. And I think, we all respond in different ways. I think for me, it's been interesting. I've pushed myself to have difficult conversations with people in my sphere. I certainly had somebody that I knew from, I've known them for a long time. And they were unfortunately posting things about like all lives matter. And I think everyone's seen that meme going around where it has like, it says a Black man was killed by a white cop, and they cross out the black and the white and they're like, racism, there, I fixed it. Not talking about it doesn't make it go away. And I think that part of the impetus for that, or the idea behind that, is if you admit there's a problem, then you have to talk about it, and you have to think about it, you have to face it, and you have to make decisions, and you have to think, how am I contributing to that, right? So I think that's why there's denial there. But it was just baffling to me seeing people deny that it even exists, or it's even a problem at all, or people saying, oh, there's no racism in Canada. Are you kidding me? Like, there is. So anyway, these are just my rambly thoughts about it. And if you disagree, or as long as it's respectful, put below. But if you're going to post like racist garbage, I'm just going to delete your comment and block you, because I don't need any of that. Nobody needs that. Like, come on. But if you, like, what are your thoughts about all this? How do you feel about it? What have you been thinking about? What are you doing? All of those things. Let me know. I love all you guys. Thank you again so much to my patrons. You guys are the best, especially Marie, Nathan, and Jamie. You guys are awesome. And thank you so much for watching me. And I will be back next week. And as always, peace and love. And